The Silent Cry is a really interesting book from Cathy Glass because, unlike most of her books, her memoirs that focus on one, maybe two foster children, the main focus here is not actually a child she is caring for. And I will, of course, explain what I mean by this. There will not be any spoilers for what to expect in the memoir, but I will talk a little bit about certain characters or children that are in this. So if you don't want to know anything at all other than the main concept, it deals with a pretty severe case of postnatal depression. I believe it was postpartum psychosis, is the term that was used. And it goes into quite a lot of detail about that. Sometimes I feel like it's reading like an amateur medical textbook, but most of the time it is warm and inviting, and you do feel like you're on this journey with Cathy as she learns more about this and does what she can to help out this family, and in particular Laura, who is experiencing this. So I won't go into too much detail about what happens to her because I don't want to spoil it, but I will talk a little bit more about that and some of the other children as well. So this was actually released in 2016, but it's the second in order. So I think Adrian was 5, her son, and Paula was like 18 months or something, if I'm not mistaken. And it does start off with her looking after various children, and it is kind of like a snapshot look at the different kind of children that a foster carer could foster, because we have this brilliant child, brilliant insofar as he is entertaining, called Samson, and he's very hyperactive and boisterous, and he lives with his grandmother, and Cathy looks after him on respite. All of the children she looks after in this are respite care. And he's such a sweet child because he has the characteristics of a child who is going to be very annoying. And in fact, it is revealed that he's never received an invitation to a birthday party before, but he's seen children at school giving them out. And you kind of, whether you're a parent and you have children, or you're a member from school yourself, there was always at least that one child who was very flamboyant or very loud, and they always seemed to be needing to be at the center of things. But because they were like that, people didn't really want to get too close to them or invite them to parties or sleepovers and things. And that's what we get with Samson. And it's a really interesting look at how a child who seems to have all of this bravado deep down just wants to be treated like everybody else and have the same experiences. And I thought that was very sweet. There's another little boy who Cathy looks after, and she spends a lot of time talking to his mother, Shelley, and she's a young mother and is a single mother and doesn't really get out much, doesn't really socialise, and it's all about kind of coaxing her out of her shell and also encouraging her to get in touch with somebody from her past as well. I won't say too much about that, but there's definitely some important encouragement in there that if a reader is in a similar situation, it could definitely encourage them to break out of their routine and mix things up a bit for the better of their mental health. And mental health is at the forefront of this because, as I said, aside from the respite care, it focuses on Laura, who is a neighbour of Cathy's, and her little girl goes to the same school as Cathy's son, and she begins to display signs of depression, I guess, to begin with. And her mother-in-law is helping to look after her, and obviously so is her husband when he's not at work. But it seems that it gets to the point where her behaviour is so unpredictable that baby Liam, her son, who I think is like 5 weeks old to begin with, is possibly even in danger. And Cathy spends a lot of time going to the library, reading about what she believed to be postnatal depression, and then what needed to be done to get Laura the help she needed, and what that help would look like. And I think that this is obviously a really important discussion to have, because Geraldine and Laura's husband, whose name I've completely forgotten because he's barely in it, so absent in Laura's care is he to begin with, and he does feel very bad about that. But of course, you have to go to work if you don't think the situation is that bad. Why wouldn't you? And I think that's the main thing. They weren't really aware to begin with just how bad things were getting. And if even one person is reading The Silent Cry and identifies the symptoms that Cathy explains Laura is experiencing and begins to think, hang on, maybe my wife or my sister or my daughter or whatever, maybe they're actually going through the same thing and it's not just a case of the baby blues. And if it encourages them to get help or to encourage their loved one to get help, that could be a huge thing. And to be honest, I feel like the book would help more than just one person do that. So it's definitely a really important subject matter. And it's obviously a very difficult subject matter for Cathy to write about, given that her memoirs are based on foster caring. But I think the book managed to bring in enough elements of foster care with several different children she looked after during respite, without feeling like we weren't reading the memoir of a foster care. I think everything kind of fit in very nicely. It made sense. She looked after Kim at some point, so everything did kind of tie together very nicely. I really enjoyed this. It is very different. I had read this one twice. I've gone back to the beginning, and I'm now reading Cathy Glass's books in order, which is a really interesting experience because I'm watching her life change and her children grow up in chronological order, and it's really different to the way I kind of haphazardly read them before. But I remember really liking this one the first time. I really enjoyed it the second time, and as I said, I think it's a really important topic that maybe isn't discussed as much as it should be. And if you haven't read it or if you can't remember it, I definitely recommend The Silent Cry.